Starting off with the worst card in the game, which is going straight into F tier, we got the Mirror. I mean, you're spending one more elixir to play the same card, which is not going to be very valuable in most circumstances, and it oftentimes gives you an awkward cycle and you find yourself not using it very much, and there's not really any deck you can fit it in. Next up, we got the Barbarian Hut, the worst building in the game by far. It just doesn't pair well inside of any deck, and it's just getting negative trades constantly because of how good spells are against it, like the Earthquake and the Poison, for example, and even the Fireball. The Void is by far the worst spell in the game. Pretty much every other spell is going to be getting significantly more value than the Void. It's hard to really fit in any sort of deck, and it's really hard to know when to use it, which is why pretty much no one ever plays it ever since it got nerfed. Same with the Rune Giant. Ever since they removed her permanent enhancing, she has just been drastically worse, and there's basically been no one playing the Rune Giant in any sort of deck, and they killed the card after the nerf. The Healer isn't even played inside of Elixir Golem anymore. There's no deck that requires it, essentially, and she is just very, very bad and out of the meta, that's for sure. The Clone, too, because of all the arrows, the tornado, the poison in the meta, it's just hard to get value out of it, which is why there's not even anyone running Lava Clone anymore, or Clone with the Giant Skeleton. You just pretty much never see it. Three Musketeers are just way too expensive at 9 elixir, and I mean, you see them in niche decks, and you could maybe make it work if you're a big 3M enthusiast, but for the most part, they're not going to be very valuable, and they're way too vulnerable to spells. The Witch is going to be next. Pretty much everyone running her is running the Evolution, and by the way, Evolutions are not part of this list. We're talking about the standard version. In the Witch, as well as the Wizard for that matter, let's face it, unless you're in mid-ladder, no one is really playing it for their standard version. They're playing it to get to that Evolution, which is significantly more powerful because they're just very weak to spells like the Fireball and the Poison, and they are hard to fit inside of your decks unless you have the evolved version. The last card going inside of F tier is going to be the Skeleton Army. It has just been very bad recently with the addition of more and more evolutions like the Evolved Furnace, for example, and even spells like the Goblin Curse are just such good counters to it, which has made it fall all the way off into F tier, and I think it is one of the worst cards in the game at the moment. We're going to start off D tier with the Rascals. Their rework was not very successful. They are still one of the worst cards inside of the game, and you can only run them in maybe a niche log bait deck. And even though, you know, that boy is getting a lot more value, it wasn't enough of a buff, clearly, to make them good, surprisingly. The Night Witch is also going to be going in D tier. With the occasional Elixir Golem sighting, you might see her, or maybe inside a Giant Graveyard, you might see her, but typically other support cards are going to be more valuable, especially because no one is really running her with the Golem much anymore, because Golem's not in a great spot, and even inside a Golem, there's just going to be better options. The Goblinstein is going to be going in D tier. Definitely one of the worst champions in the game. He's either the worst, in my opinion, or the Little Prince. That's kind of up for interpretation. But ever since he got nerfed, there's not really any deck he's seen in anymore. Even inside of graveyard decks, people prefer to use other things instead of him, whether it's an evolution or a support card. He is just a lot worse, and after they gave him several nerfs, he is a lot weaker now. And the Goblin Demolisher, they gave it a small buff, but it has proven to remain very weak. Besides an occasional drill deck, that's pretty much going to be the only place you see it. But even inside of drill, there's typically going to be better options than him. We're going to go for the E-Barbs next. The E-Barbs, guys, unless you're in mid-ladder, they're just not going to be that good. They're very easy to defend with distractions like the skeletons, the guards, or kiting them even with something like an ice golem, so they're just definitely on the weaker end. The regular recruits are going to be going into D tier. Kind of like the Wizard and the Witch, guys, let's face it, the regular recruits are pretty bad. Everyone running them is running it to eventually get to the evolution, which is way more threatening because they charge and they actually, you know, pose way more of a threat than the standard version, which is really easy to deal with in most circumstances. Same with the regular Executioner. The Evo has helped it out a ton and actually gets it played because the regular version, besides Hog X NATO, which is very rare, that was hardly ever seen before the Evo was added. That's why the regular Executioner is not really that great. There's just going to be better support cards than it. The Freeze is going to be going into D tier as well. Pretty much the only deck you're going to see it in is Graveyard Freeze. Lumberloon Freeze has greatly fallen out of the meta for the most part, making it a pretty niche spell, and you're only going to get value out of it, it seems like, if your opponent isn't expecting it and you catch them off guard. The regular Barbarians are going into D tier. They have just been really, really bad as more evolutions have come into the game, and with how many people are using things like the Fireball, they are horrible, and the only reason people play them is to just get to those Evolved Barbarians next time around, which are significantly stronger, but the standard version is horrendous outside of maybe the occasional Lava Hound. Elixir Collector is going to be going inside of D tier, with spells like the Earthquake inside of the game definitely keeps it in check, alongside Three Musketeers and Golem not being in the best spot. Pretty much the only deck you're going to see the Elixir Collector in now is actually a Bridge Spam deck or maybe Pumpo, but overall those things are pretty off meta. The Hunter is going to be going inside a D tier as well. Pretty much the evolution is where it's at. That's where people are playing the Hunter, but even the evolution, it's only going to be inside of Royal Giant for the most part, so that's going to be the main deck the Hunter is in, and there's just typically going to be better support cards than the regular Hunter. The Elixir Golem is going to be going in D tier, definitely one of the weaker win conditions right now in the game. It is very toxic, don't get me wrong, especially paired with cards like the Goblin Machine and the Curse, but it's just not that reliable of a win condition. It definitely has more bad matchups than good matchups, but it is definitely a pretty low skill win condition, so people tend to gravitate towards it and still play it sometimes, even though majority of the matchups are going to be bad for it. The Cage is going to be going inside of D tier as well. Pretty much for the Cage, no one is really running the standard version. Most people are preferring to run the Evolution, which is just drastically stronger because the regular version is pretty weak against Beatdown, and it doesn't have a lot of health, the Cage itself. And the Brawler, it's kind of nice that you're getting that, but it's most people just cycling it for the Evo. Same as the Mega Knight, which might surprise some people, but the Mega Knight, guys, the standard version is not that great outside of mid-ladder. It really isn't, and people tend to know how to defend it with cheap cards. You can even get an easy king activation. And then, of course, heavier cards are going to be even better against it. Tanks like the Knight, for example, or just a lot of different things. It is very easy to deal with if you know what you're doing. The Battle Ram, the regular version, is going to be going in D tier. The Evolution's a lot stronger. The standard version just gets stopped right in its tracks really easily by buildings and also stuns and resets, which is why you don't often see it. Little Prince, in my opinion, the Gobstein or the Little Prince are the worst champion in the game. Both of them are in D tier. I think that he's slightly better than the Goblinstein, though, just because he's cheaper, which allows a little bit more flexibility, and that's why you see him from time to time inside of things like Minor, Cycle, or Drill, where the Goblinstein, you're not really going to see it in those decks anymore. The E-Drag is going to be... What the heck? Okay, there we go. The E-Drag is going to be next. In my opinion, it's just very weak without the evolution, and I'll actually kind of combine it with these two cards as well. Actually, so basically all these four cards, it's basically the same story. They're pretty much bad without their evolution. Pretty much everyone playing these cards is playing them to eventually to get to the evolution. The Evolved E-Drag, way better than the standard version, as you guys know, actually able to defend everything if the opponent doesn't have a spell. And then the Evo Lumberjack, which respawns inside of that Rage, which is absolutely broken in some scenarios. And then same with the Evo Gobgiant, which spawns the Goblins, and then, of course, the Evolved Archers that have the extra damage. All these cards, though, are weak and below average, their standard version, and that's why you pretty much almost never see the standard version on their own. People have the evolution, which they get to eventually, and that's kind of the purpose of these cards in the meta, not the standard version themselves. The Magic Archer, guys, is going to be at the start of C tier. Ever since the Tornado got nerfed, he has definitely been a bit worse, and he's not used as much with the Tornado inside of that Minor Wallbreaker deck. But inside of P.E.K.K.A, he might occasionally be used, so he's kind of an okay card, but nothing too crazy anymore. The Phoenix guy's got a little bit of a buff where it's dealing more death damage now, but that hasn't been quite enough to revive it and make it better compared to some other support cards like the Inferno Dragon or the Mega Minion, which is why I think it is only in C tier even after the recent buff. The Tombstone is going to be next. I think that it's kind of a weaker building compared to some of the others. Pretty much at this point, you can only run it inside of Lava Hound decks, and even some Lava Hound decks don't even really play it anymore, which is why I think it can't be too much higher. The Flying Machine is going to be in C tier. Honestly, the Spirit Empress has kind of made this card significantly worse because it's basically a better Flying Machine that costs 2 more elixir, but the benefits definitely make it worth that extra elixir. So you're only pretty much seeing it inside of Recruit Royal Hog decks. The Goblins, guys, are pretty bad now because of things like the Guards and also the Skeletons just providing significantly more value. It has made the Goblins fall out of the meta, and you're pretty much only seeing them in Hog X NATO. That's going to be the only deck. Firecracker, guys, way worse ever since they nerfed her, and she's not getting as much of a knockback. That has significantly just made it easier to not miss your spells on the Firecracker, like arrows, fireball, whatever it is, and that has definitely helped mid-ladder players a lot defending her, and now you're pretty much only seeing her inside of Hog. That's basically the only deck she is going to be good in. Skeleton Barrel is going to be next. The regular version is just simply not that good compared to the evolution. Everyone is running the standard version to get to the evolution. It's kind of like the other standard versions I was talking about earlier, but with the Skeleton Barrel, maybe not as much ever since they gave it a little bit of a buff, but still, it's not really that great. The Sparky is going to be next. The Minions buff has actually revived it a tiny bit, so I think it's in C tier instead of D tier, but with Rocket running rampant in the meta and also all the resets, it's definitely not going to get super far, and you only see it sometimes with the Evolved Gob Giant. You don't even really see it in Giant anymore. The Goblin Machine is going to be next. I feel like it's pretty decent in pretty toxic decks, like with the Royal Chef inside of Gob Giant P.E.K.K.A, or maybe inside of Elixir Golem. It's going to be pretty strong, but you definitely don't see it too often inside of Cycle decks, so it's a bit of a inconsistent card. The regular Bats are going to be in C tier, and then the Zap is also going to be there as well. I think both of these cards are kind of similar strength. I would actually have the Zap, now that I think about it, at the bottom of C. The Zap, pretty much the only reason people run it is to get to the evolution. It is honestly pretty weak, the standard version, but it's also the same with the Bats as well, and I think that the Evo is just significantly more valuable, but it's still going to be pretty good inside of minor cycle decks. Delivery is going to be next. I think it's an okay spell, especially inside of minor decks, minor control, or Royal Hogs, Royal Delivery, but those decks aren't super OP in the current meta, and there's just definitely better spells than the Delivery. You would, in most scenarios, prefer to have a spell that can actually damage your opponent's tower, spells that are just like considered larger spells or smaller spells like the Log or Barbed Barrel are just going to be more valuable most of the time. Golem, guys, is going to be going inside of C tier as well. I think that he's a little bit better after the buff he received to his Golemites, so he's no longer in D tier, but I don't think it was enough of a buff to put him in B or certainly not A tier, because it's just proven to be too easy to defend him still because of all the buildings inside of the game, and also a lot of the evolutions which just get a lot of value against him. The Mini P.E.K.K.A, I would say, slightly better than the Golem. You're seeing the Mini P.E.K.K.A often inside of Goblin Giant decks and things along those lines, and he pairs very well with stuff like the Rage, but it's not the most versatile thing in the world. You definitely can't run him inside of Cycle decks, so you're never really seeing the Mini P.E.K.K.A inside of like a Miner or a Hog deck, but I would say inside of heavier decks, he's pretty good ever since he got that buff. Heal Spirit's going to be going inside of C tier. I think that it's the worst spirit in the game, but for only 1 elixir, it is getting a lot of value, especially inside of Goblin Giant decks and Bridge Spam decks, which are the 2 most common decks that you see it in. But outside of that, not really that great, not as versatile as the other spirits in the game. Musketeer is going to be going inside of C tier. The regular Musketeer is just not really that great compared to the evolution, which most people are playing. The ultimate goal, of course, is to get to the evolution, which is just significantly stronger. But the Musketeer is going to be pretty good inside of 2.6, but Loon Cycle, especially ever since the Ice Golem got buffed, those two decks have definitely been in a pretty decent spot. The Inferno, guys, is going to be next. I think that it's kind of a fairly weak building in a lot of matchups, but in some matchups it can be good if you're maybe playing against a Lava Hound or something like that, or a Giant. But most bait decks nowadays prefer running the Tesla or the Cannon over it, which are just cheaper and are going to be more effective in a lot of situations. So the Inferno is just a little bit too inconsistent against cycle decks. That's the main issue. The regular P.E.K.K.A is going to be going in C tier. It's made a little bit of a comeback recently, especially inside of that Royal Chef Goblin Giant deck. Even the standard version proves to get some value in some situations. And then not even only that, but with the Battle Ram, it's pretty good. No one really runs it with the Ramrouter anymore, but P.E.K.K.A actually finished in the top 5 last season. I actually think it was even number 2 in the world, if I remember correctly, with the Battle Ram, and it was the regular P.E.K.K.A, not even the Evolution, so that proves that it definitely is viable. These Zappies are going to be going above the P.E.K.K.A. I think that after the buff the Zappies got, they've definitely proven to be a lot better now. They are actually viable in a couple things besides just recruits. You don't only see them in recruits anymore. You can maybe make them work inside of some type of Royal Giant deck or maybe a control deck if you really want to. They're not going to be the most versatile thing in the game, but with them having that hit speed buff definitely greatly helped them out. The Suspicious Bush, guys, is going to be above the Zappies. I think it's gotten a little better recently inside of those spam decks with, like, the Wall Breakers, for example, and the Boss Bandit. I saw a new one with the Evo Furnace. It's not, though, the most consistent win condition, especially if your opponent has a building, or with all the people running Barbarrel and Log in this meta. There's definitely effective ways to stop it, but it can be really annoying if you don't have the right response. The Tesla, guys, is going to be next. I think it's a bit better than the Inferno for sure, just because they both target air, but the Tesla kind of just does it for one less elixir. So, for example, if you're playing against something like a Balloon, you'd be better off having the Tesla in most scenarios compared to the Inferno. And that's even just talking about the regular one, not even the Evolution. The Evolution is a different story, but the regular Tesla is just going to be a bit more valuable in some scenarios, but it's of course not going to be the best building, in my opinion, the regular version, and there's other better options, which I'm going to get to. The E-Giant is going to be next. I think it's a bit better than the Golem. Ever since they gave him that sight range buff, you can't just kite him halfway across the map anymore, but, I mean, there's going to be win conditions better than him. I feel like it really is just dependent on the matchup, and also with the minions now, actually the minions can counter the E-Giant. They outrange the circles, so that's definitely keeping him in check. I think if it weren't for that, he would be higher, but when paired with the right cards, with the Lightning and the Tornado, for example, he can be really annoying to deal with, but again, buildings are just going to be an effective way to stop him, similar to the Golem. The Monk, guys, ever since it got that nerf recently, where it's not going to be reflecting as much anymore, that definitely has reduced the amount of usage of the Monk. He's still going to be a pretty good option inside of RG, but overall, the difference compared to before, he's no longer one of the best champions inside of the game anymore, but not one of the worst either. He's going to be kind of average compared to the other champions now. The Baby Dragon is going to be in C tier, even though it got a buff to the Splash Radius, which has helped it out a bit. It's not the most versatile of cards. Pretty much the main deck you're going to be seeing it in is Graveyard, especially Graveyard Freeze, but also Splash Yard. You're not really seeing it inside a Golem anymore like it used to be played in, so I don't really think it's much higher than C tier, even after the buff. Next is going to be the regular Goblin Barrel. This might surprise you guys because a lot of people think of bait being in a really good spot, which it is, but it's mostly because of the evolved Goblin Barrel. And I think the regular Goblin Barrel is just significantly worse, and that's why pretty much no one is playing the regular barrel. Pretty much everyone playing it is running the Evolution, which they're trying to get to. In the standard version, they're just kind of like forced to play, which can be okay sometimes, but with all the people running Barbarrel and Log, it's not really the greatest of win conditions. It's not as good as you would expect. And it's kind of the same scenario with the regular Valkyrie. Like, pretty much no one is running the regular Valkyrie. Basically, everyone is running the Evolution. And when we're comparing the regular Valkyrie to something like the Knight or a Berserker, you're pretty much going to pick the Knight or Berserker just about every time. And a big part of it, of course, though, is because she's 4 elixir and more expensive, but That's why, in my opinion, she's just not as good. So the Bomb Tower is going to be the start of B tier. With things like Loon Cycle rising recently, it's definitely helped the card out a bit. And then, of course, you can also run it inside of some maybe Wall Breaker deck if you want to. And I think that it's a pretty sturdy building, definitely a bit better than the Tombstone for sure. And I would make the argument it's slightly better than the regular Tesla, but a lot of people are still going to pick the Tesla over the Bomb Tower because there's that evolution which they have. But I think the regular Bomb Tower is better than the regular Tesla, in my opinion. The Bowler is going to be going inside of B tier here. I think the main drawback of the Bowler, as strong as he is he's not the most versatile option. Pretty much the main deck you're seeing him in is going to be Graveyard Freeze, because Lumberloon Freeze is not really meta anymore. But inside of Graveyard Freeze, he's super solid defensively. He's just got a lot of health, and the Bowler's just, even he can attack the tower from the bridge sometimes, which is crazy. The Earthquake, I would say, is B tier as well. Very good for breaking through buildings like the Cannon, for example, which so many people are using, and just other buildings as well, like the Goblin Hut. And that's why, Royal Hog Cycle has the success it has, and especially Hog Cycle. Hog Cycle is even better than Royal Hog Cycle at the moment. And of course, you got to pair the Hog Rider with the EQ to have a chance of breaking through buildings, so it's a reliable spell for doing that. The Cannon card, I would say, is next. I think that ever since they gave it that rework, or they fixed that bug so now it doesn't retarget when it breaks, that has drastically helped the card and put it back into the meta. I don't think it's OP or anything like that, but I would say it's an average card because inside of Mortar decks it has proven to be very strong, and even inside of some Bridge Spam decks it's very good in as well, and even some Goblin Drill decks I see it in. But with all the Furnace and stuff, it's a bit weaker in this specific meta. The Skeleton Dragons are going to be next. They're very, very good inside of things like Lava Hound especially, but then even in Mortar, they get run into sometimes. But I would say Lava Hound is the main deck where you're commonly seeing them in. It's like the best support card for Lava Hound. Like, Lava decks, I feel like almost always have the Skeleton Dragons as kind of their support card of choice. As strong as the minions are, it's kind of interesting, but even now, a lot of people are preferring the Skeleton Dragons over the minions just because I think of that Fireball bait aspect, and they kind of like that it has a little bit more health. The Snowball is going to be next, and just the regular Snowball, not even the evolution. The regular Snowball is really solid, especially inside a Loon Cycle. A lot of people like having it because instead of like pushing things backwards and then when it expires, then they start attacking the balloon. With the regular Snowball, it's better because you can push things like to the side, so it's better to pair it with the balloon compared to the Evolved Snowball. So just for Loon Cycle alone, I think that's why it's deserving of B tier. The Ewiz is going to be in B tier, even though it got a bit of a buff recently. It definitely hasn't put it into A tier territory or anything like that. It has made it a more reliable support card though, for sure, which is why I think he's a bit better than the Musketeer right now, because inside of things like P.E.K.K.A. especially, or maybe inside of a Giant deck, I think that he's a much better support card compared to the Musketeer, for example, and slightly more versatile at the moment in this meta. The Mega Minion is going to go in B tier as well. I think it's just a much better option compared to something like the Phoenix, for example, because it's one less elixir and it's going to get the job done kind of the same way. You're often going to see this card in stuff like Giant, for example. You might see it in Elixir Golem. It's going to be in heavier decks. So a lot of the heavier decks you think of might have it. Golem, you might sometimes see it as well. Things like that. The Fire Spirit is going to be next. It's definitely better than the Heal Spirit, but not as good as the, spoiler alert, is probably pretty obvious, not as good as the E Spirit or the Ice Spirit, obviously. But inside of things like Goblin Drill or maybe Royal Hog Cycle or even Hog, you could fit it in, and it's kind of nice. You get a lot of DPS for only one elixir, but honestly, let's face it, with all the people running the Furnace, they're probably going to prefer running the Furnace over the Fire Spirit because it literally spawns it. I mean, am I right? Minion Horde is going to be next. I never thought I'd be putting this card in B tier. It has been such a long time since it has been good, but ever since they buffed the Minion's range, my goodness, it has been a lot better. You're actually seeing this card now inside of Mortar Bait, so you're actually like baiting out the spells, a deck that used to be good a few years ago. And then I'm even seeing it, I think, in some Lava decks, which is kind of crazy, or some Giant Balloon Minion Horde off meta deck someone was playing as well. So the Minion Horde is back, guys. It's pretty crazy. Dark Prince is going to be going inside of B tier. I feel like it's just a solid support card in my opinion, especially inside of Gob Giant decks. That's where it's going to be very, very good. It kind of pairs really nicely with the minions as well. I think the minions buff has kind of helped it out a bit, like Gob Giant Minions Dark Prince, because it's sort of, because it's quick, it kind of goes well with the minions that are quick too, if that makes sense. And it's kind of nice to have that splash damage. The Giant Skeleton, guys, is actually a lot better. Ever since it got that buff in the last set of balance changes, I've actually been seeing it again, especially inside of Graveyard decks. There's this new Graveyard deck, which finished, I think it even finished top 15 in the world last season. It's this Graveyard Goblin Hut deck, and with the Giant Skeleton having that, it's either extra damage or extra health. I can't remember what it is, but it has certainly revived it, and I'm seeing it in Graveyard and then also in competitive. Some people are playing it too, so the Giant Skeleton is back, guys, after the buff, and it's kind of a nice tank to all the fire spirits that spawn out of the furnace. Mother Witch, guys, is going to be in B tier. I think the Graveyard being as good as it is right now has helped to revive the Mother Witch and just kind of all the spammy cards and stuff like that. It's definitely in a much better spot than it was before because it's kind of a nice tool for countering the meta in certain decks, like maybe inside of a Royal Giant deck or inside of a E-Giant deck, for example. A Gob Giant deck is going to be very good. Golden Knight, guys, is going to be in B tier. The biggest problem I feel like for the Golden Knight is there's not many decks where it's like a requirement in. It's kind of the type of thing where it's like you can use it if you want to, but some of the things he's going to be best in, I feel like, is going to be with the Recruits, Royal Hogs, and then also maybe with like E-Giant. But in a lot of the bridge spam decks, it's kind of like you can use them if you want, but you don't really like have to, and I feel like it's not really as broken as it was a couple months ago. The Royal Hogs are going to be going inside of B tier. They've kind of been toned down a little bit recently with Royal Hog Cycle not being as good, but obviously Recruits Royal Hogs are in a pretty decent spot, so I would say they're kind of like an average-ish win condition. Ramrouter, I would say, is slightly better than them. The Ramrouter has been a bit better recently because I think she actually pairs quite well with the Furnace. There's a lot of people using Furnace Ramrouter. It's not even P.E.K.K.A. Ramrouter, interestingly enough. There's not that many people running that. It's actually the Furnace, which kind of brought her back into the meta as being, you know, kind of an average-ish win condition now, which is pretty interesting. The Goblin Gang is going to be next. Ever since they nerfed the Spear Goblins, it has been a lot worse, so it basically went from S or A tier all the way down to B tier, in my opinion, because I would just say the guards are a better option now after the Spear Goblin nerf compared to the Goblin Gang. The Ice Golem is in B tier ever since they gave it that health buff. He has proven, he or it, I guess whatever it is, has proven to be a lot better compared to how it was before, especially in Loon Cycle. It basically single-handedly revived Loon Cycle. You can also use 2.6 more freely now if you want to, and also even something like 2.9 Expo, you now can run that if you really want to, 2.9 Enthusiast, so I would say definitely in B tier. Spear Goblins, I would say, are B tier as well. I mean, they basically went from S tier to B after the nerf, kind of similar to the Goblin Gang because of the Spear Goblins nerf. It was quite impactful, that's for sure. The Mortar, guys, is going to be going in B tier. I think that the regular Mortar has made a little bit of a comeback recently. One of the biggest reasons for that, though, in my opinion, is because of the Evolved Skeleton Barrel and things like that, which has really helped out the Mortar because it just pairs so well with it, and I think that's really what it came down to more than anything. The Archer Queen I'm going to have as above the Mortar. I think that she's a very solid champion, especially inside of Royal Hog Cycle, but not only that, Mega Knight, Evolved Mega Knight specifically, she pairs very, very well in that Mega Knight spam deck with the Prince. I think she kind of is part of the reason why that deck is so good for the 3-card cycle, obviously, in a good air counter, and if you don't have Lightning to take her out, she can be pretty annoying. The Tornado used to be SA tier for the longest time, but now that it can't kill Spear Goblins anymore after the damage nerf, it has changed a lot of interactions, and now there's some Tornado decks that are just simply not as good, but inside of things like Graveyard, it's still very, very OP and a must-have in your deck. So I would say it's going to be worse in a lot of Cycle decks, but in a lot of the heavier decks, it's still going to be very, very good in. The Royal Giant's going to be next. This is kind of a interesting one to rank, but if we're talking about the standard version, I really don't think it's that broken because everyone runs the evolution. You pretty much need to run the evolution when you run RG because that Evo knocks back the ground troops. So if someone's going for like a Knight, a Berserker, a Mini P.E.K.K.A on it or whatever, you're getting way more hits in with the Evolved Royal Giant compared to the regular version. But it's not like the regular version is bad. It's just not that great. So, but it's not down here. Like, it's obviously not in D tier. There's no way I'm going to put the regular RG in D tier just because it's not like these where it's like people only play them for the Evo. The regular RG is not bad. The Dark Goblin is going to be in B tier. The Evo is really bad now. Ever since they nerfed it, it's pretty much killed the Evo. But the standard version, there's a lot of people still running inside of bait decks because he can be really annoying to deal with if you don't have the proper spells or rotation. Giant's going to be next. I feel like he's an alright win condition. I think compared to a lot of the other tanks like the Electro Giant and the Golem, he's a lot better than, just because he's cheaper and a bit more consistent. So that's why Giant Graveyard, you might see him. I don't think Giant Graveyard's in the best spot this meta, but maybe something like a Giant Prince deck, a Giant God Machine deck, Giant Inferno Drag, something like that, he can be very solid. And the Bandit's going to be going in B tier. She's going to be very good inside of Bridge Spam decks. Not a complete requirement because of the Boss Bandit. I think the Boss Bandit is actually what brings her down to B because a lot of people prefer running the Boss Bandit over the regular Bandit. And they're typically not going to have both in the same deck, but some people still want to have the Bandit, maybe if they have another champion in their deck besides the Boss Bandit. The Expo is going to be going in B tier. It's made a really big comeback recently with it got like an accidental buff, I'm pretty sure, and they never reverted it because they figured maybe it like deserved the buff or something. I don't know. That's what I heard anyway, some people talking about. But anyway, it's dealing, I think, a little bit more damage than it did before. It's only like 1 or 2 more damage. And it finished #1 in the world a couple times this year, which is pretty crazy. The Evo Archers were definitely what helped it out a ton, but maybe now it's going to be a bit worse because the Evolved Archers got a nerf in the last set of balance changes. But until then, I'm still going to say it's a pretty solid win condition and an above average card for sure at the moment. The Princess, guys, is going to be the start of A tier. Princess is way better than the Goblin Barrel, in my opinion. I actually think the Princess is one of the things that makes bait as good as it is. She's absolutely obnoxious because, of course, the range, you can have it on the other side of the map, and if the opponent doesn't have a spell or a good troop to take her out, basically unkillable. Secondary win condition as well because you can play her at the bridge when the opponent's low on elixir or they don't have a good rotation, forcing an overcommitment, which can be really annoying for the opponent to deal with sometimes. The Ghost is going to be next. I think it's a little bit better compared to something like the Bandit, just because there's not as good of a replacement for the Ghost, except maybe something like a Skeleton King. But I feel like the Ghost is very unique because of his invisibility, so that's why a lot of Royal Giant players really like to run the Ghost, or P.E.K.K.A Bridge Spam players, and he's just getting a lot of value in a lot of circumstances as a 3 elixir splash card that goes invisible. The Prince is going to be in A tier. A lot of people think the Prince needs a nerf because of how annoying he is. I don't think he's in S tier, though. I don't think he's that annoying. I think because of the meta shift and also with things like guards being as popular as they are, he is pretty strong inside of things like Giant or maybe with the Mega Knight, but I think he's a bit more under control now, especially because things like the Dagger Duchess were nerfed, which he paired very well with. I think he's just kind of now a strong and above average card, but he's not completely broken, but he's definitely in a very good spot. Skeleton King, in my opinion, one of the best champions in the game at the moment. A lot of people like playing this card inside of Mortar decks where they have all those baity cards where they can fill up his bar really nice and easily, of course, but then he's also going to be good inside of some toxic things, maybe like Elixir Golem. Graveyard he's also going to be very good in. That's going to be another deck where it's going to be very easy to ensure that you get some nice abilities and a couple other things as well. And I just think like it's just very valuable, right? A 4 elixir champion, a lot of health, and then the ability to gets a lot of value in a lot of different circumstances, especially with how many people are running the Cannoneer, and the Cannoneer doesn't tend to be that good against the Skeleton King. The Ice Wizard is going to be next. Ever since they gave him that buff to the splash, he has been significantly better, and there's even some people running him outside of Tornado decks. You don't even have to run him with the Tornado anymore. It's not a complete requirement. There's some Graveyard decks that he's used in, and they're not even running the Tornado because they don't have to pull everything together anymore. He kind of does that for them because of the splash radius increase. So he's in a very, very solid spot. at the moment. The Lava Hound is going to be next. Lava Hound, guys, very good win condition, especially with the Spirit Empress, which recently got buffed. It has definitely made the Lava Hound a lot better because half the time the Spirit Empress gets used is inside of Lava Hound decks because it's really nice to have a good tank for that Spirit Empress, so then she's basically unkillable. But then, of course, Lava Loon is a very good combination as well, and Lava Miner, so there's a few different kinds of lava decks you can run, all different kinds of support cards, like maybe you want to run the Skeleton Dragons, maybe you want to run the Inferno Drag, maybe you want to run the Minions, whatever the case is, there's definitely going to be a lava deck you can run. The Rage, guys, is going to be next, even though the Rage got a rework or whatever the heck happened in the last set of balance changes, is still proven to be one of the best spells inside of the game. For only 2 elixir, you're getting a lot of value. You're able to take out some things like skeletons and bats, and you can also rage up a lot of quick cards or toxic cards or whatever the case is, making it really difficult for your opponent to defend, which is why you commonly see this card inside of some bridge spam decks or with the Goblin Giant, Elixir Golem, whatever, the Ram Rider, the Prince, so many things you can pair well with it, especially things that just kind of, you know, they're obnoxious, and then they're even more obnoxious with the Rage. The Fisherman, guys, is going to be going inside of A tier as well. Inside of Royal Giant, especially, it's very, very solid. But not even just Royal Giant, because you have Goblin Giant P.E.K.K.A, which the Fisherman is going to be very good in as well, and it's just so valuable for the King activation. But not even only that, just pooling things to the middle and then having both of your towers shoot at something is very, very effective too in a lot of scenarios, especially the Cannoneer. I feel like the Cannoneer especially he pairs very well with. The Wall Breakers are going to be next. I think that they're slightly better than the Fisherman, and this is just the standard version. I think even the regular Wall Breakers are just in a really, really good spot. You can use the regular Wall Breakers. You don't even have to use the Evolution, but the Evolution, of course, is where it's at, and they're going to be even better. But the point I'm making is that's why the Evolution is so good, because the regular Wall Breakers are very good. For only 2 elixir, they deal so much damage. You have to respond to them, and, you know, they move so quick. So unlike the Bush, where you have plenty of time, you gotta basically respond instantly to the Wall Breakers, right? The Boss Bandit is going to be going in A tier. I think it's a bit better than the Wall Breakers. I think she is one of the, for sure, best champions in the game. I think there's one a little bit better than her currently, because after her nerf, she got toned down a little bit. Gotta give them a little bit of credit. Their nerf, the rework, whatever happened, she's been a little bit worse since then, but she's still very, very good inside of bridge spam decks or inside of bait decks with the Suspicious Bush or the Wall Breakers. She's absolutely obnoxious, but I think with she got a little bit of that health nerf, and with what they did for the ability, that has helped make her a little bit more balanced. But a lot of people definitely would argue she definitely needs a nerf still, which I guess is up for debate. The Rocket, guys, is going to be going in A tier. I think that it's a very good big spell. It's partly why I think bait is good. A lot of it's because of the Rocket. It's also going to be very good, though, with the Goblin Drill. Some Expo players might even run it instead of the Fireball, and some Miner decks run the Rocket too. Miner control, they might want to have Rocket as their spell of choice instead of something like the Poison, because they might want that extra air support. It actually kills the Spirit Empress, so I think that alone might be part of the reason why so many people are running it. The Goblin Drill is going to be going A tier. Definitely one of the best win conditions in the game ever since people realized how good the Evolved Snowball is with it. It's better than the Evo Drill. Evo Drill sucks, but the regular drill is actually pretty dang good, especially with all the broken evolutions you can pair well with it. And, you know, if you have a champion with the deck and Evos, you can eventually outcycle your opponent, get a drill down when they don't have a good counter, or if they do got a good counter, just going for that Evo Snowball and get a ton of damage. Regular Inferno Drag going to be going in A tier. I think even the standard version and not the evolution is a very, very good card. I think that's why the Evo is actually so good, because the regular Inferno Drag was already a very, very solid card. It, of course, is going to be very good inside of Lava Hound decks, but also inside of Graveyard Freeze. It is very good. You can maybe make it work inside of a Giant deck as well. Just a solid card inside of Beatdown. The Mighty Miner is going to be going in A tier. I think that it is slightly better than the regular Inferno Drag. Mighty Miner, in my opinion, is the best champion in the game. I don't think it necessarily needs a nerf per se, but it's just very solid in this current meta. There's just so many different decks it's being played in. There's not even like a specific deck it's great in. Of course, Hog. Hog would be the obvious one, right? Hog Mighty Miner is very, very good. But then outside of that, it's just versatile. You can use it inside a Goblin Drill if you want to, which a lot of people do. You can use it inside a bait if you want to, which a lot of people do. It's just very good DPS wise, and having that one elixir ability where you can send it into the other lane is just very valuable, which is why you commonly see it in suspicious bush spam decks instead of the boss bandit now, because it can just be really annoying for your opponent to deal with, and you can catch them off guard when they're low on elixir. The Mighty Miner is going to be going, the Lightning I'm going to have above the Mighty Miner. I think it's a bit better than the Rocket at the moment. A lot of people are running the Lightning, of course, inside of Royal Giant. I think that that's the best Lightning deck currently, and the fact that the Lightning is able to kill the Furnace, that's why a lot of people like preferring it, running it over the Fireball in their deck. Even though I think the Fireball is better, that's the reasoning why some decks have the Lightning, in my opinion, instead of the Fireball. And then, of course, inside of things like E-Giant, it's going to be very good. And also Bridge Spam, a lot of the Ram Rider decks are actually running the Lightning in their deck as the spell of choice. They might have like Lightning in their deck and Barb Barrel, so they have that as a big spell, and then they got the small spell. It's going to be very good at breaking through buildings, so getting through something like a cannon or a Goblin Hut, it's going to be very useful for that. The Balloon guys, I'm going to have it in A tier. I definitely think it's better than the Lava Hound because there's some people that run, of course, the Balloon without the Lava Hound. Of course, there's Loon Cycle, which I've talked about already a couple times, which is going to be a very solid win condition in that. But then also in Lumber Loon Freeze, that's pretty like off meta. But I guess the point is there's other decks you can run the Balloon in besides just Lava Hound, and the Lava Hound decks often have the Balloon in it, which is why I think the Balloon is better than the Lava Hound. The Arrows guys are going to be going in A tier. I don't think they're in S tier anymore after the nerf they got where they decreased the radius, and I actually think that's part of the reason why the minions have just been running rampant recently after the buff is because of the fact that the arrows were nerfed, so that has kind of allowed the minions to get even more free reign. But they're still alright, don't get me wrong, especially inside of Mortar decks you're going to commonly see them, or maybe inside of a Lava Hound deck, but they're just not going to be viable in every single deck anymore. The regular cannon's going to be going in A tier. I think even the standard version and not the evolution is just so strong. It is only 3 elixir, and it just gets a ton of value against so many different tanks and support cards. Of course, a lot of people are running it to get to the Evo Cannon, but there's even a few people running just the regular cannon, and they don't even have the evolution just because of how much value it gets for only 3 elixir. The Hog Rider is going to be above the cannon. I just think he's one of the best win conditions in the game for sure. He's always so consistent no matter what the meta is. Of course, inside a 2.6 Hog X NATO, but the main deck, of course, is going to be Hog EQ with the Mighty Miner. He's just so solid, and even after the Firecracker got nerfed, I feel like you can outplay so many matchups if you play perfectly, and if you don't have a building or a tornado, he can be so difficult to deal with, and I think there's just a lot of outplay potential, which is why every meta, he's always so good. The Bomber is going to be next, guys. There's so many people running the regular Bomber instead of the Evolution ever since the Evolution got nerfed. The regular Bomber, I would actually say, is better than the Evolution, kind of like it's the same with the Goblin Drill, if that makes sense. The regular Bomber is so good inside of things like Goblin Giant, heavier decks like Lava Hound, you might sometimes see it as well, E-Giant, but then also cycle decks like the Goblin Drill. It is just such a versatile card for only 2 elixir and gets a lot of value for only 2 elixir as well, dealing splash. The E-Spirit is going to be an A tier. I think that it's one of the best spirits in the game. Inside of Royal Giant and Expo, it is getting so much value. You won't see it inside of things like Goblin Drill and Hog, where it's an easy king activation, but things where the activation doesn't matter, like Expo and RG, it's absolutely OP and gets a lot of value in those matchups and situations, which is why I think it is in A tier. The guards are going to be next. They're a lot better than the Goblin Gang currently, which is why I have them a tier higher, and they survive arrows, which is pretty cool. And they're going to be very useful against things like the Prince. I actually think it's part of the reason why the Prince is kept in check, because of things like the guards. They're just going to pair very well inside of Lava Hound decks. They're going to be very good inside of Giant as well. You could use them in bait. You could run them in Mortar. So many different things you can run them in, and they're just going to be very good defensively. Graveyard guys, in my opinion, such a solid win condition right now. A big part of it is because of the Goblin Hut. The Goblin Hut has helped revive Graveyard so much. When Splash Yard was kind of falling out of the meta a bit, it kind of brought it right back. So now so many Splash Yard decks are running the Graveyard with the Goblin Hut, but then also Graveyard Freeze is in an amazing spot right now because of the evolved Inferno Drag. In fact, a lot of pros even think the Graveyard needs a small nerf with how good it has been getting recently, and I can't blame them because it is by far one of the best win conditions in the game, and even the Furnace has probably been helping it out a lot as well. The Goblin Curse, guys, oh my gosh, this used to be one of the worst cards in the game, but now it is one of the best. People have realized how good this thing is. It is insane. You're seeing it in a large variety of decks. There's so many people running it inside of things like Lava Helm, in bridge spam decks with things like the Rage, the Ramrod, or the Boss Bandit, stuff like that. You could use it with the Giant. You know, you can use it with the Miner. There's some Miner decks. You have to be pretty good to run it, like Miner cycle decks, but it's good in so many different things. It can be used to defend things like a Graveyard, a lot of the Swarmy and Bait cards, and even when it's not those things, just allowing your units to get more damage when you're running the P.E.K.K.A. Goblin Giant Curse deck. It is just such a solid spell. And then I think, though, the Goblin Hut is a little bit better than the Curse. The Goblin Hut is going to be at the end of A tier here. I think it's the best card in A tier. It's so close to being S tier in my opinion, but I think the nerf it got a couple balance changes ago where it got that health nerf. I think it's not completely broken, but it definitely could use a small nerf, but it's just way better. Ever since they gave that Goblin Hut a rework, it has made the card really, really good again, and really annoying for a lot of people to deal with. If you don't have a Poison or an Earthquake, it can get a lot of value. It's amazing in Graveyard, but it's also going to be pretty good inside of Miner Wall Breakers. You can make it work as well. After the nerf, though, it's not going to be good in Hog or Royal Hogs much anymore, which is why I don't really think it's in S tier anymore. We're going to start off S tier, though, with the Poison. I think the Poison is in such a solid spot because ever since they nerfed the Furnace to make it die to the Poison, so many people are running the Poison just to kill the Furnace. I think that's kind of what brought it up to S tier, even though it was an A before. It's just simply because it's the best counter to the Furnace in the game. It also pairs very well with the Miner, though. Miner Poison is very solid, and of course Graveyard with the Poison, so it has some really good combinations. Next, guys, is going to be the regular Furnace. This might be a bit of a controversial one, but I honestly think the regular Furnace is still an S tier card. The only reason, though, why people think it isn't is just because the Evo is absolutely broken, but at the top of ladder, everyone is running the Evo because they have the pass, basically, or they had the shard saved up. So the Evo Furnace is significantly more broken, but the regular version is very, very OP too, which makes the Evo seem very broken too, which it is. The Evo is absolutely broken, but the regular version itself is solid. So you're completely fine running the regular version to get to the Evo. And those are the Evos that tend to be absolutely broken when the regular version is already very good. And my point to prove that will be coming up very, very soon. The Fireball, I think, is slightly better than the Poison. Even though it doesn't kill the Furnace, so many people are running the Fireball in this meta, especially inside of Royal Giant. The Royal Giant Bard Barrel combination, very good against the Furnace. It's also going to be very good, of course, inside of Expo, where you're going to want that direct damage. A lot of lava decks like running the Fireball as well for that direct damage. It's going to pair very nicely with spells like the Curse too, or something like the Evolve Zap. And then, of course, things like 2.6, you could run the Fireball in as well. This is kind of up to debate if you think the Fireball or the Poison is better. It's very much dependent on preference, and I think it's subjective because it's quite close. Fireball is also going to be very good inside of things like Goblin Drill decks to push things back. You might want to have that instead of the Snowball if you want. The Knight, guys, is another one where it's like the standard version is very good. Of course, most people are running the Evolved Knight, just like most people are running the Evolved Furnace. But the point is, the fact of the matter is, the regular version is still very, very good. The regular Knight, not even the evolution, just the regular version, is a solid, solid card, which is why a lot of people run the regular version, not even the evolution, kind of like the Furnace. The regular Knight is just going to be very, very solid, you know, inside of, you know, a Graveyard deck, a Hog deck, a Goblin Drill deck, so a lot of cycle decks, control decks, a very good tank, and it's just getting a lot more value compared to something like the Valkyrie. And the Furnace is the same way. Even though he's not spawning the Fire Spirits as often, because he deals so much damage and has the range that he does, that's why he's still very OP in my opinion, and some people are calling for him to get another nerf, or at least the evolution of his to get a nerf. The Ice Spirit, guys, is the best spirit in the game, in my opinion, even though it got a nerf recently where the freeze duration got reduced ever so slightly. It is still proven to be the best spirit of choice, especially inside of cycle decks, whether it is Logbait or it's Hog, Goblin Drill, whatever, right? Maybe Bait. Like, a lot of the cycle decks really like having the Ice Spirit because it just stalls things in place for such a long time. So it's a little worse, but not enough, in my opinion, to bring it down to A tier. The evolution, though, is a lot worse because the nerf impacted it twice, essentially, instead of once, which is why the Ice Spirit, the regular version, I actually think is better now than the evolution, because now the regular version gets used more than the evolution. So regular version is still S tier. Evolved version is a lot worse. Keep that in mind. Berserker, guys, in my opinion, S tier. People, I even made a video about this recently, why the Berserker is better than the Knight. In my opinion, guys, people have finally started to catch on and realize how good the Berserker is. It's basically, it's not the same thing as a Knight, but because it's 2 elixir and has a lot of health, she doesn't die to a fireball, does a lot of DPS, a lot of people prefer running her over the Knight. So this is kind of one where it comes down to preference, and it's subjective, but I think the Berserker is slightly better than the Knight. Inside of things like Graveyard, or inside of Hog decks, inside of Miner decks, inside of Mortar decks, inside of, there's even some heavier decks I'm probably not even thinking of off the top of my head. Also, Royal Giant, she's very good in this new Royal Giant deck. The Berserker is getting so much value for only 2 elixir, and I think she's definitely one of the best cards in the game at the moment. The Miner, though, guys, still one of the very best cards in the game at the moment as well, even after the nerf he got. He's no longer a top 3 card in my opinion, but I would still definitely have him in the top 10. He's for sure one of the best cards in the game at the moment, just for getting chip damage on the tower. And not even only for that, it's just he pairs so well in so many things. Like Lava Hound, a lot of the Lava Hound decks are using the Miner, but then of course there's Miner Rocket, Miner Poison. You can maybe run Miner with the Giant if you want to. Miner Mortar is a very popular strategy as well. He's just super solid even after the nerf he got, which is kind of what I thought was going to happen. The Bard Barrel, guys, oof, it is rose a lot recently. It is definitely one of the best cards in the game. A big part of it is because of the Furnace. It's a really solid counter to the Furnace because you kind of throw that Bard Barrel in to maybe finish off the Furnace if you already damaged it with the, the Fireball, or if it has a little bit more health and it doesn't quite die to the Bard Barrel, immediately the Barbarian that comes out is going to finish off the Furnace, whereas the Log is not going to do it. That's actually why so many people are running the Bard Barrel inside of things like Royal Giant now, or it was already being used a ton in the decks it normally is used in, like inside of Electro Giant, for example, Golem, Graveyard, heavy decks like that, but now people are actually running it inside of Royal Giant, and even some cycle decks occasionally, just because of the Furnace. A big part of it is because of the Furnace, so keep that in mind. It could just be based on the meta, but it's just a very solid way of countering that. And it could also be the Log nerf too, which made some people switch to Bard Barrel instead. The Spirit Empress, guys, is 100% one of the best cards in the game. Definitely top 5 after the buff she got. She's basically a flying machine that doesn't die to a lightning. A lightning zap doesn't even take her out, actually. She does a ridiculous amount of damage. An insane amount of damage. Like, you can't really let this card lock on your tower. It's basically, it deals about the damage, I think, of an RG shot. Maybe even more. It's doing like 400 damage. It's insane. So inside a Lava Hound, she's absolutely broken, of course. But then also inside a Bridge Spam, with the Ram Rider, she's very, very solid in, but then also a lot of Graveyard decks are playing her as well, so she's very good in a large variety of things. You could maybe even make her work inside of a Miner Control deck. She pairs very well with the Furnace too, so just a lot of broken combinations with the Spirit Empress, specifically though the Dragon Rider flying version, not the ground version. The flying version, I think, is S tier. The ground version, I would say, is more like A or B tier. I just want to make that very clear. The Skeletons are going to be in our top 3 now. Skeletons I'm going to have as slightly better than Spirit Empress. They're just so cheap, so solid for making your cycle quicker. And ever since the Evolved Skeletons got nerfed, Skeletons are actually better than the Evolved Skeletons because people are preferring to run them and then save their evolution slots. So they're just going to be very solid inside of Hog, of course, Royal Hog Cycle, Royal Giant, you're commonly seeing them as well, minor decks. Whatever deck you want to have them in to make your cycle faster, they're definitely going to be, the card for you to run. The Log guys is going to be, the Minions guys is going to be next. It's going to be the second best card in the game, in my opinion. Crazy to think one of the weaker cards in the game, a below average card, ended up being the second best card in the game after the recent buff that it got, where it just outranges everything. It's amazing inside of Royal Giant decks. The Spirit Empress also pairs very well with the Minions if you want to run it inside of a Lava deck. It's, of course, going to be very good with the Goblin Giant inside of Sparky if you want to run that. Maybe a Giant deck inside of Giant Graveyard, a Mortar deck they're going to be very good in. My goodness, the range is absolutely ridiculous. It is insane. Even inside of a Furnace meta, the amount of people that are playing them, that just proves how broken they are. That in a Furnace meta, they're having the success that they're having. Because the Furnace should theoretically be a good counter to them, but the thing is, a lot of people are just running them with the Furnace. So they're just using 2 broken cards in the same deck. Or maybe even 3 if they want to run the Spirit Empress as well, which you're sometimes seeing in these bridge spam decks. But lastly, guys, the Log, in my opinion, is still the best card in the game. As crazy as it sounds, even after the nerf it got, it's still being used slightly more, actually, compared to the Barbed Barrel. It's very close, but the Log is being used a bit more. It's just way too versatile inside of cycle decks, whether it's Hog, Goblin Drill, Royal Hogs, sometimes Royal Giant. People prefer running it still over the Barbed Barrel. And then, of course, Miner as well. You're often going to be seeing the Log in that deck. So that's going to be my ranking, guys. Let me know what you think. The Tower Troops I'm going to briefly do as well. They accidentally buffed the Cannoneer, by the way, so the Cannoneer is not even that far off. The Princess Tower and then the Duchess, in my opinion, the Chef are a lot worse. So that's going to be my ranking. Let me know what you guys thought about this format. I did it a little differently than how I did it before. I kept the tier list format that a lot of people wanted to see, but I decided to do worst to best in the tier list format. So let me know what you guys think. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. You can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game, and thanks again until next time, guys.